The stars are out, the rain is falling, and a new story awaits. Welcome to your cozy escape. This is Slow Lore. Come in. Come in out of the noise and the hurry and the bright, relentless light of the world outside. Come in out of the busyness that has followed you all the long day, tugging at the edges of your coat, calling your name from every corner and screen and obligation. You do not need to answer it tonight. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to be. Nothing you need to remember, no list to tend to, no message to send, no question that cannot wait until morning. Tonight you are here, and here is very good. Find your position now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench just slightly. You may not have realized how tightly you were holding it. Pull your covers up a little higher, or settle deeper into the softness beneath you. Let your hands go still. Good. I want to take you somewhere tonight. Somewhere that exists just on the edge of memory. Wrapped in the scent of coal smoke and old leather and the metallic sweetness of iron in winter. Somewhere that the modern world has nearly forgotten and yet, in the forgetting, has somehow made more beautiful. We are going to London. Not the London of today, with its glass towers catching the sky and its endless electric hum. No, we are going to a London of amber lantern light and gaslit cobblestones. A London of fog and iron and magnificent ingenuity. A London where the grandest temples were not built of marble for gods, but of iron and glass for the miracle of the locomotive, that great, breathing, fire-hearted machine that stitched together an entire empire, mile by mile, through hill and heath and hollow. We are going to Victoria Station, or perhaps, in the truest spirit of the evening, something even older, one of those vast cathedral-like terminals that the Victorians built with the pride of a civilization at its peak. An iron and glass palace, arching 60 feet above the tracks, holding the rain at bay with its great ribbed dome. A place where the steam of 10,000 journeys has long since risen and dissolved, and what remains is only the quiet. The kind of quiet that settles over large, beloved places when the last passengers have gone home. And inside, tucked away from the drafty main platform, behind a heavy oak door with a frosted glass window, is a small room. Your room tonight. It is the station master's private waiting room, kept for those rare souls, railway officials, distinguished guests, the occasional weary traveler caught between connections on a winter's eve, who need a place of absolute refuge. The walls are paneled in dark walnut, worn smooth by decades of passing hands. A small iron stove occupies the corner, its belly glowing amber and red, throwing its warmth across the room in slow, wavering ripples. On the mantelpiece above it, a brass clock ticking so steadily, so patiently, that you stop noticing it almost immediately, and then it becomes part of you the way your own heartbeat is. There is a leather bench along the far wall, deep and wide, upholstered in the color of old Burgundy wine, softened by years of use to something very near perfection. Someone has laid a heavy wool blanket across it, the color of heather in November, gray with a thread of violet running through the weave. You have drawn it up over yourself. It smells faintly of cedar and something older, something you cannot quite name, something like time itself. Beyond the small, thick-paned window beside you, the world is rain. It falls with absolute authority from a sky you cannot see, only the underside of cloud, gray as pewter, lit from below by the golden smear of gas lamps on wet cobblestones. It falls across the great arched glass dome of the station, playing 1,000 small, separate notes on the iron struts above. It runs in thin, bright rivulets down the outside of your window, distorting the amber light of the platform lanterns into slow, sliding ribbons. It hisses softly into puddles on the iron track. It drums very gently on the roof above your head. Outside, it rains. Inside, you are perfectly, entirely safe. Tonight, we will not rush. We will sit with this room and this rain and let the evening unfold in its own unhurried time. There are stories here, old, gentle ones, about the men who built these iron roads, about the keeper of the great clock above, about the particular hush that falls over a grand old station when the last train has gone and the gas lamps burn low and the rain is the only voice remaining. But for now, just this, just the warmth, just the sound of rain against glass, and the soft, deep creak of the old building settling around you, holding you as it has held so many before. Let your eyes grow heavy. We have arrived. There is a particular quality to shelter that you can only truly understand in the presence of rain. On a still, dry evening, a room is simply a room. Walls, a ceiling, a floor. The body accepts it without comment, the way it accepts 100 small comforts it has stopped noticing. But place the same room in the middle of a rain shower, a real rain, rhythmic and thorough, the kind that has intentions, and it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a haven, a held breath, a cupped pair of hands. This is what you have tonight. Listen for a moment to the sound of the station around you. Beyond your door, that heavy oak door with its frosted glass panel, behind which the amber light of the platform flickers like a distant hearth, the great iron terminal breathes. It is not silent. A building of this scale, a building that has swallowed the comings and goings of 10,000 souls a day for 50 years, does not simply fall silent when the passengers have gone. It has its own rhythms, its own language, its own nocturnal voice. There is the low, satisfied groan of iron cooling in the night air, contracting almost imperceptibly after a long day of bearing weight and warmth. There is the whisper and hiss of a steam pipe somewhere beneath the platform, still sighing from the passage of an engine that left hours ago, releasing its last exhaled breath in a long trailing note. There is the distant sound of water of rain finding its way through some small gap in the glass above, dripping from an iron cross-strut down to the tracks 40 feet below, each drop landing in a small, bright note against the iron rail. Plink, 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 patient as a metronome. And above all of it, above the settling iron and the sighing steam and the bright percussion of that lone dripping water, there is the roof. That magnificent, extraordinary roof. You cannot see it from where you lie, but you know it is there. You have seen it earlier today, when you first arrived, or perhaps you have only imagined it, the way one imagines great things that exist more fully in the mind than they do in actuality. A vault of iron ribs and glass, arching from the platform walls and sweeping upward in a single soaring gesture, like the skeleton of some vast and benevolent creature that chose, at the end of its journey, to simply lie down over this place and become its shelter. The glass is old, not quite clear tinged, rather with the faintest amber and green of age, the way old bottle glass takes on color from the decades. And now, in the rain, every pane of it is alive. The water runs across it in sheets and trickles, catching the light of the platform lanterns from below, fragmenting it, making of the whole great dome a slow-moving kaleidoscope of amber and shadow. From inside, where you are, the rain against that high glass is a sound of extraordinary comfort. It is not the hard, insistent drumming of rain on a tin roof, though there is something magnificent in that too. It is softer, more diffuse. The glass and iron of the great dome catches the rain at every angle, and what reaches your ears is a kind of white murmur, 1,000 separate impacts blended into one continuous, breathing wash of sound, like the sea heard from a cliff top, like wind through a forest canopy, like the collective exhale of something very large and very old and very peaceful. It falls, and falls, and falls. Your room is small enough to feel entirely yours. This is important. Grand as the station is, and it is grand in the way that great old Victorian public spaces are grand. A grandeur that does not intimidate but rather envelopes, the way a cathedral makes you feel not small but somehow included in something larger than yourself. This room is scaled for one. For you. The leather bench fits the length of your body with something close to intention. The iron stove fills the room with warmth without ever quite making it too warm. The window is precisely the right size, large enough to see the platform, the rain-softened lanterns, the long dark rails stretching away into the London night, small enough to feel framed, contained, like a painting rather than an open wound in the wall. On the small deal table beside the bench, someone has left things for you. A pewter mug of something warm tea, perhaps, though it has cooled now to the temperature of a held hand, which is the best temperature for tea. A saucer on which rests a single shortbread biscuit, its edges golden, its surface dusted faintly with sugar. A small oil lamp, turned low, its flame barely a thread of amber behind the clouded glass, but sufficient for the room. Sufficient for the eyes to rest without losing the shapes of things. And on the bench beneath the blanket, you. Let us spend a little time simply being here. There is no train to catch. The last express departed some hours ago. You heard it, perhaps, as you were settling in. The long, gathering complaint of iron on iron, the hiss and surge of the engine, the slow-building thunder of it pulling away into the night, swallowed eventually by the rain and the distance until there was nothing left but the echo, and then the echo of the echo, and then the quiet that followed, which was deeper than the quiet before. The station is yours now, or rather, you are the station's. It has taken you in for the night, in the patient, unsentimental way of very old buildings. It does not make a fuss over you. It simply holds you, the way the earth holds everything, without preference, without ceremony, and with absolute reliability. Think for a moment about the rain on the glass above. That same rain is falling right now on all of London, on the cobbled lanes of Cheapside, where the fishmongers have shuttered their stalls and gone home to their suppers, on the great dark dome of St. Paul's, where it runs in rivulets between the stone ribs and drips from the copper eaves in long, thin threads, on the Thames, that slow, silver-black river, where it pocks the surface in a million tiny craters that appear and vanish and appear again. The river receiving the rain the way it receives everything, with patient indifference, carrying it southward, away. It falls on the parks where the last dog walkers have long since gone in, on the markets, closed and quiet under their canvas awnings. The smells of the day, fish and flowers and mud and roasting chestnuts, slowly dissolving in the wet air, on the rooftops of 10,000 houses, where families have drawn their curtains and lit their fires and settled in for the night, the sound of rain a companion to their sleeping. And on this station, on this roof, on this glass, reaching you eventually as that soft, continuous murmur, that breathing, that white tide of sound, that has been with you since you arrived and will be with you still when your eyes finally close. Let your body grow heavier now. This is something the rain does if you let it. The steady sound of it, that unhurried, unceasing patter, has a way of making the body understand that nothing is required of it. No alertness, no readiness, no listening for a particular sound or watching for a particular moment. The rain contains all moments. It is the same now as it was a minute ago, and it will be the same a minute from now. And in that sameness is the most profound invitation to rest that the world knows how to offer. The wool blanket over you is heavy. Not uncomfortably so, rather significantly so. The kind of weight that reminds the body of its own edges, that says, here is where you end and the world begins, and between you and the world is warmth and wool, and you are safe within it. You are very specifically, very precisely safe. The stove in the corner ticks softly, a small, metallic sound as the iron cools infinitesimally, then warms again. The flame behind its grate is low and steady, orange, deep amber, the occasional flash of true blue at the very heart of the coals. The heat reaches you in slow waves, the way the tide touches the shore, not rushing, not receding, but arriving reliably, again and again. Outside, the platform lanterns burn. You can see them through your window, those tall iron lampposts with their flared glass heads, each one a small sun in the wet dark, each one surrounded by its own halo of misty gold where the lamplight meets the rain-wet air. They stand at their intervals along the platform with the patient dignity of sentinels, illuminating nothing in particular, simply being present, simply maintaining their small promise of light in the surrounding dark. The tracks run away beneath them, gleaming where the lamplight catches them, disappearing into darkness at the edge of the platform. They are empty now. They have not been touched by a wheel since that last train, hours ago, and they will not be touched again until first light, until the pre-dawn freight, grumbling and slow, makes its way in from the west, still dark outside, the crew wrapped in their greatcoats, hands around their mugs of strong tea. But that is hours away. For now, the tracks are still. The platform is still. The station hums its quiet, metallic hum, barely perceptible, the way a tuning fork barely vibrates long after it has been struck. You feel it more than hear it, a low, resonant memory of all the engines that have passed through here, all the wheels, all the pistons, all the fire-hearted, iron-lunged machines that have made this place what it is. There is something about being inside a great building during rain that makes you aware, in the most comfortable way, of your own smallness. Not smallness as diminishment, not smallness as insignificance, but smallness as proportion, the quiet recognition that you are one warm, breathing thing inside a very large and ancient world, and that the world has, on this particular evening, arranged itself around you with something very close to tenderness. The dome above, the walls on every side, the warm dark pressing gently in, the rain on the glass, that eternal sound, telling you without words, without argument, with nothing but its own repetition. You are here. You are held. You are permitted to rest. Let your arms go heavy. Let your legs go heavy. Let the last little coil of the day unwind itself from somewhere behind your sternum, that tightly held place where the to-do lists live, where the half-finished worries sit, where the things you meant to say and the things you should not have said and the things you cannot know yet all compress themselves into a knot of mild, chronic urgency. Feel it loosen. Feel it soften. You do not need it tonight. It will be there in the morning if you want it. Tonight, the rain is doing all the work. The station breathes. A distant pipe hisses once, softly, a sound like a sleeping giant shifting in its sleep. Then silence. Then the drip of rainwater somewhere deep in the building, finding its way through some secret passage in the ironwork, making its unhurried journey from dome to darkness. Then silence again, and over it all, through it all, beneath it all, the great steady murmur of rain on glass. You are warm. The blanket over you smells of cedar and old wool and something faintly like the past. Not any particular past, but the general past. The way old rooms and old books and old stations carry in their very fibers a residue of all the time they have witnessed, all the breathing and hoping and departing and returning that has happened within their walls. You are part of that now. One more warm body in a long, unbroken chain of warm bodies who have sheltered here, in this iron cathedral, in the rain, and felt exactly this. The deep, bone-level satisfaction of being inside when the outside is weather. Of being still when the world outside continues its ceaseless motion. Of being, for this one soft, lamplit hour, entirely sufficient. Entirely arrived. Let the sound of the rain come forward now. Let it be the largest thing in the room. Larger than your thoughts. Larger than your body. Larger than the bench beneath you and the blanket above you and the warm amber glow of the stove in the corner. Let it fill the space behind your eyes, that restless interior space, until there is only that sound, that steady, silver, intimate sound of 1,000 raindrops finding the great glass dome above you. Each one tiny, each one gone in an instant, the whole of them together forming something permanent and unbroken and endlessly soothing. With every drop, you are more comfortable. With every breath, the station holds you closer. With every minute that passes in this lamplit room, the distance between you and sleep grows smaller, quieter, more inevitable, the way the distance between the shore and the sea grows smaller as the tide comes in, until at last the water simply arrives, gentle and complete, and the shore lets itself be covered. Safe inside. The rain continues to fall, and the station holds you, as it has always held you, as it will hold you through the long, soft hours ahead, while the gas lamps burn gold on the empty platform and the iron tracks gleam in the dark and London sleeps beneath its rain-washed sky. Rest here a little longer. There is no hurry. There is never any hurry here. When you are ready, when the room has settled fully around you and your body has grown as heavy as river stone and your breathing has found the rhythm of the rain, we will go a little deeper into the story of this place. We will learn how it came to be, who dreamed it, who built it, who first breathed its coal smoke air and marveled at its dome and understood, perhaps without words, that something had been made here that would outlast all of them. Every engineer and stoker and station master and weary traveler who ever sheltered, as you shelter now, from the English rain. But the stories can wait. For now, only this. The warmth, the wool, the amber glow. The rain against the glass, falling and falling and falling. Safe inside. There were men who dreamed in iron. Not metaphorically, not as a manner of speaking. There were specific men, in specific rooms, at specific hours of the night, who sat at their drafting tables with the candles burning low and conceived, in extraordinary detail, things that had never existed before in the history of the world. Bridges across gorges that had defeated Roman engineers, tunnels through hills of solid limestone, viaducts of such slender, soaring grace that the local people, seeing them rise for the first time against the sky, refused at first to believe they would stand. They stood. The story of the great British railway terminals is, at its heart, a story about imagination meeting industry, about what happens when a civilization decides, collectively, that it will not be content with the pace of a horse, that it will insist on something faster, something louder, something that breathes fire and drinks water, and pulls behind it a chain of carriages full of human beings traveling at speeds their grandparents could not have dreamed. It begins as so many English things begin in the West Country. In Bristol, in the 1830s, in the offices of a young engineer named Isambard Kingdom Brunel, a name so extraordinary it sounds invented, yet was entirely real, the product of a French father and an English mother and a childhood spent watching his father build the first tunnel under the Thames. He was 26 years old when he was appointed chief engineer of the Great Western Railway. 26. Picture him for a moment. Not the famous portrait you may have seen, the one where he stands before the great chains of a launching ship, stovepipe hat cocked at an angle, cigar in hand, radiating the absolute confidence of a man who has never once doubted that what he imagines can be made real. Picture him younger than that, lighter, sitting in a modest office in Bristol, a city that smelled then of tar and tobacco and the sea, bending over a sheet of cartographic paper in the lamplight, drawing a line. A line from London to Bristol, 118 miles. And this line, this simple, elegant, audacious line would become the Great Western Railway, the finest railway in the world. The rain outside does not know any of this history, of course. It falls on the iron tracks beyond your window with the same indifference it shows to everything, the same indifference it showed to the men laying those tracks in 1838. Their backs bent against the English weather, their hands raw with cold and work. But you know it, lying warm under your blanket, and there is a particular pleasure in that, in carrying the past with you into the present, into this warm room, letting the stories of those iron-dreaming men settle over you like another layer of warmth. The line from London to Bristol required the construction of over 100 bridges, dozens of tunnels, great embankments of earth raised across low-lying ground, and deep cuttings carved through hills of chalk and clay. It required the labor of tens of thousands of men. The navvies, they were called, from navigators, a name inherited from the canal-digging era men who moved across the English countryside like a slow, powerful wave, reshaping the land with pickaxe and barrow and sheer, extraordinary physical endurance. They worked in all weathers, including rain very like this. But let us not linger too long on the difficulty of it. The navvies were, by most accounts, a remarkably resilient and surprisingly festive lot, paid relatively well for the era, fond of their strong beer and their songs, prone to extravagant expenditure in the towns they passed through and equally extravagant generosity toward their own. They came from everywhere, from Ireland, from the Scottish Highlands, from the impoverished rural counties of England. They followed the railway the way their ancestors had followed armies or harvests, moving on when the work moved on, leaving behind them the permanent, astonishing infrastructure of the modern world. And at the end of the line in London, they built the terminus. Paddington Station. The name itself has a particular music to it, does it not? Paddington, as though the syllables were chosen for their warmth, their roundedness, the way they sit comfortably in the mouth. The station was designed not by Brunel alone, but in collaboration with an architect named Matthew Digby Wyatt, and what they produced together was, and remains, one of the most remarkable interiors in England. 3 great spans of iron and glass, arching side by side over the tracks, each one a separate nave in this cathedral of commerce and travel. The ironwork was cast in elaborate decorative patterns, not merely functional, but beautiful. The Victorians believed, with a conviction we have somewhat lost, that there was no reason a useful thing could not also be a lovely thing, that a train station might aspire to be as fine as a church. And so they made it fine. They ornamented the iron columns with patterns drawn from Moorish architecture, from Gothic tracery, from the natural world, leaves and flowers and geometric forms that caught the light and threw shadows in the shifting hours of the day. They glazed the great roofs not in plain glass but in glass that admitted a warm, diffused light, the color of early morning on a clear day. They built the booking halls and waiting rooms and first-class lounges with materials chosen for their richness. Polished mahogany, etched glass, encaustic tiles, brass fixtures that glowed like small fires in the interior light. They understood something we have perhaps forgotten, that the places where people begin and end their journeys matter, that the threshold between the familiar and the unknown deserves to be marked with beauty. Brunel himself, as the railway neared completion, wrote in his notebook that extraordinary private journal of engineering sketches and personal reflections, that the Great Western was the finest work in England. He was right, and he knew he was right, and he said so without embarrassment because the Victorians had not yet learned to be modest about their achievements. Their self-confidence was, by any measure, colossal. and perhaps we can forgive them in the warmth of this room on this rainy evening, with the evidence of their work still standing all around us, the iron, the glass, the tracks running away into the dark. He died at 53, Brunel, worn out by the scale of what he had attempted and in many cases achieved. His last great project, the steamship SS Great Eastern, an absurdly ambitious vessel 5 times larger than any ship previously built, had broken his health and his finances both. He suffered a stroke on its deck days before its maiden voyage and died 10 days later, in 1859, having never seen it sail. But let us not end on that note. The Victorians themselves would not have wished it. They believed, almost as an article of faith, in legacy, in the permanence of well-made things. A bridge well-built, a tunnel well-bored, a terminus well-designed. These things outlast the men who made them. They outlast the critics and the doubters and the rivals who predicted failure. They outlast the companies that commissioned them and the governments that funded them and sometimes the very industries they were built to serve. The iron tracks beyond your window tonight, or tracks very like them, on a route very like the one Brunel drew with his pencil in that Bristol office, have been carrying passengers for nearly 200 years. Think of that. 200 years of mornings, of arrivals and departures, of reunions and farewells, of children pressing their faces to carriage windows to watch the countryside go by, of businessmen falling asleep over their newspapers, of young women traveling alone for the first time, hearts quickening with the strangeness and excitement of it, of old men going home from the city for the last time, watching the familiar fields come back with something close to relief. All of them on these tracks, all of them inside these iron and glass cathedrals. And now you, here on this rainy evening, warm inside your blanket, listening to the rain on the glass that Brunel and Wyatt and their army of navvies and ironworkers and glaziers and carpenters put above your head. There is another name worth resting with for a moment, as the rain falls and the stove glows. Robert Stephenson, son of the great George Stephenson, the man who built the very first steam locomotive to carry passengers on a public railway, the Rocket, which achieved the then incomprehensible speed of 29 miles per hour at the Rainhill trials in 1829. The crowd who watched it could not quite believe what they were seeing. A machine, moving under its own power, faster than any horse, dragging behind it a carriage full of human beings who were laughing and gripping the sides and looking at the countryside rushing past and knowing, even in that moment, that something had changed forever. Robert inherited his father's genius and added to it a particular elegance. He built the high-level bridge at Newcastle, the Royal Border Bridge at Berwick, and the Britannia Bridge across the Menai Strait, a structure of such engineering daring that the engineering establishment of the time gathered to watch its construction with a mixture of fascination and barely concealed anxiety, certain it would collapse, quietly devastated when it did not. These men corresponded with each other, argued with each other, competed with each other for commissions and for glory, the way great artists have always competed, the way the Renaissance painters competed for the walls of Florentine chapels. Brunel and Stephenson debated the gauge of the railway track. Brunel chose a broad gauge for the Great Western, believing it would allow faster speeds and more comfortable carriages. Stephenson's narrower gauge ultimately became the national standard. It is a debate that has its own melancholy footnote. Eventually, in 1892, the Great Western was converted to standard gauge, and Brunel's broad gauge track was torn up in a single weekend, the largest and most rapid feat of railway conversion ever attempted. Over 200 miles of track replaced in 48 hours by an army of workers laboring through the night. You can imagine it, perhaps, the sound of it, iron being lifted, rails being moved, the smell of disturbed earth and metal and decades of oil, the strange grief of it, progress overriding progress, the new erasing the old. But the stations remained. The great stations Paddington, King's Cross, St. Pancras, Victoria remained, were added to, modified, extended, were bombed in the Second World War and rebuilt, were threatened with demolition in the post-war decades and defended by preservation societies, were cleaned and restored and reopened with something approaching ceremony. They remained because they are very, very well built, and because people love them. People love them in the way they love old churches and old markets and old libraries, with the particular affection one reserves for things that have quietly done their job for a very long time without making a fuss about it. Things that have witnessed more history than any individual life can contain, and have absorbed it all, and stand there still, patient and solid and indifferent to fashion. The rain continues to fall outside, on the tracks those men laid, on the roof those men designed. And you are here, inside what they built, warm and still and far from sleep, but drifting, perhaps, toward it, the way a boat drifts toward a harbor when the tide is coming in, not rushing, not resisting, simply moving with the quiet insistence of gravity and water toward the place where it will rest. Let the history settle over you now like a second blanket. Let it have the weight and warmth of old things well made. Let the names of those men, Brunel, Stevenson, Wyatt, become simply sounds, pleasant sounds, sounds that belong to the same world as the tick of the brass clock and the creak of the iron roof and the rain on the glass. They built well. You are warm. The rain continues to fall. Safe inside. In a little while we will climb. We will leave this cozy room and make our way slowly, unhurriedly, as everything moves in this late-night station, up through the building, up through the levels of iron and shadow and gaslit corridor, to the very top of the terminal, to the clock tower, to the place where a single man spends his nights in the company of gears and time. But not yet. For now, let the history rest. Let the engineers sleep as you are beginning to sleep. Let the iron cool and the rain fall and the stove burn low. You are safe inside. The station holds you. And the rain goes on, as it always has, as it always will, finding the glass and the iron and the ancient, patient stone, falling without urgency, without end. There is a man in the clock tower. He has been there since 10 o'clock. He will be there until 4 in the morning, when the first light begins to show at the edges of the eastern sky and the earliest freight engines begin to stir in the engine sheds beyond the platform. 6 hours every night, in the company of gears and pendulums and the slow, magnificent turning of time. His name is not important, or rather, his name is the kind of name that belongs to him so completely, so quietly, that it has become indistinguishable from the place itself. He is simply the clockmaker, the horologist, the keeper of the terminal's heartbeat. Follow him for a little while. Not physically, you are warm and still, and you should not move from where you are. But with your mind, let your mind climb the stairs that he climbs each evening, leaving the warmth of the ground floor behind, ascending through the building in that particular way of old iron staircases. A sound between a ring and a groan with each footstep, the metal remembering the cold of the night air even here, inside, away from the rain. The staircase wins. There are no straight lines in a clock tower, not in the climbing of it. You turn and turn again, and the sounds of the station below you diminish, the distant hiss of a pipe, the settling creak of the roof becoming something felt rather than heard, a low vibration in the iron beneath your hand on the rail. The clock room itself is small. This surprises people who imagine the interior of a clock tower to be as grand as its exterior face suggests. But the room is modest, perhaps 4 paces across. The walls are curved. You are, after all, inside a cylinder of stone and iron, and they press close on every side, giving the space the feeling of a nautilus shell, of something coiled and self-contained and quietly perfect. And filling almost every available surface, every wall, every inch of the ceiling's clearance are the gears. Brass mostly, some iron, fitted together with a precision that approaches the mathematical sublime, each tooth of each gear cut to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, each axle aligned so exactly that the whole mechanism, which weighs several tons in aggregate, moves with a smoothness that a child's hand could set in motion. The largest gear is perhaps 3 feet across, turns so slowly that you cannot see it moving, and yet, if you look away and look back, it has moved. A fraction of a degree, a hair's breadth, but moved with absolute certainty in the direction it has always moved, driven by the weight of the suspended pendulum below, which swings through its arc once per second, once per second, once per second, marking out time in the only currency it knows. Tick. Tock. Tick. The clockmaker moves among these gears the way a gardener moves among familiar plants. Without urgency, without the self-consciousness of someone performing for an audience. He has been doing this for how long? 20 years, perhaps more. Long enough that his hands know the shape of every component before they touch it. Long enough that he could, if he needed to, perform his work in total darkness, guided entirely by the geography of the mechanism as it lives in his memory. He carries a small oil can. Brass, of course. Everything up here is brass or iron, nothing so frivolous as silver or chrome. He moves to each bearing in turn, each point of contact where metal meets metal, and friction would, over time, undo the precision of the whole, and he applies a single exact drop of oil. A drop so small it barely catches the light, but sufficient, more than sufficient, enough to keep this particular piece of time moving accurately for another week, another month, another year. He does not think particularly while he works. This is one of the gifts of skilled repetitive work, the kind of work that the hands know so well that the mind is freed from it entirely. The mind can wander or rest or do nothing at all. The clockmaker's mind, on these long winter nights, mostly rests. It sits inside the warm silence of the clock room, not quite silence, of course. The tick of the escapement, the faint whir of the going train, the distant percussion of rain on the tower's stone exterior, and it is simply present, aware, comfortable in the awareness. He has learned over 2 decades of nights that there is no use in rushing time. At a certain point in his rounds, roughly 11:30, when the last of the evening's passengers are long gone and the station has settled fully into its nocturnal self, the clockmaker crosses to the small circular window on the north face of the tower. This window is perhaps 18 inches across. It is set deep into the stone, and its glass is old, very old, older than the clockmaker himself, perhaps original to the building, and it distorts the view slightly, the way all old glass distorts, giving the world outside a faint, dreamlike shimmer. He stands at this window and looks out at London. Tonight, as you rest below, this is what he sees. The gas lamps of the street below, each one a soft smear of gold in the rain-wet air, their reflections running and wavering in the puddles on the cobblestones. The rooftops of the surrounding buildings, their chimney pots trailing wisps of pale smoke that dissolve immediately into the rain. The great dark shapes of the city's monuments, a dome here, a spire there, rising above the lower roofline like the heads of sleeping giants. And rain, everywhere, rain. It falls past the window in long, diagonal lines, visible against the lamplight below, each drop a brief bright thread. There and gone in an instant, replaced immediately by another and another, in a continuous silver curtain that hangs between the clock tower and the city like a veil between the present and the past. The clockmaker has watched London from this window through all its moods. He has watched it in fog so thick the gas lamps were nothing but a dim, amber smudge 20 feet below. He has watched it in summer heat, when the city shimmered and the tracks below expanded almost imperceptibly in the warmth and the whole station hummed a slightly different note than usual. He has watched it in snow, rare in London, but extraordinary when it comes. The city going quiet and white, the sound of the station muffled as though wrapped in flannel, the iron of the great roof carrying its load of white with a particular stoicism. But rain is what he knows best. Rain is the London he has spent most of his professional life inside of. And he has made a kind of peace with it, or more than peace, something closer to affection. Rain, he has observed, is honest. It does not pretend to be anything other than what it is. It does not perform. It does not adjust itself for the comfort of observers. It simply falls because the conditions for falling have been met, and it will continue to fall until those conditions change. And in the meantime, it asks nothing of you except that you acknowledge it. He finds this restful. After 20 years of maintaining a mechanism whose entire purpose is the measurement and announcement of time, a task of absolute precision, a task in which a deviation of 30 seconds per week is considered a failure, he finds the rain's indifference to measurement deeply soothing. The rain is not early or late. The rain simply is. Below him, somewhere in the warm heart of the station, you are resting. He does not know you are there, of course. The clockmaker is not much given to thinking about the passengers, the ground floor world of arrivals and departures, of luggage and tickets, and the particular theater of platform goodbyes belongs to a different domain entirely. His domain is up here in the brass and iron quiet, in the company of the gears. But you are there, warm under your wool blanket, your breathing slowing, your body growing heavier with each pass of the pendulum below his feet. Tick, tock, tick, tock, each swing of which marks out another second of this long, rain-filled night, each second identical to the last, each second carrying you a little further from the busy world and a little deeper into the warm, wordless country of sleep. The clockmaker turns from his window. He has one more task before his midnight round is complete. He crosses to the winding mechanism, a system of weights and pulleys that stores the energy driving the clock, like a great slow spring being kept under tension. Once a week, on Wednesday evenings, he winds the clock fully. Tonight is not Wednesday, but he checks the weights as he always does, reads the position of the suspended iron blocks as a doctor reads a pulse, looking for any deviation from the expected, any sign that something has shifted or slipped in the mechanism. All is well. All is always well in the clock tower when the clockmaker is present. He settles into the small wooden chair in the corner of the room, the only piece of furniture up here, a plain ladder-back chair worn smooth by years of his sitting in it, and he takes from his coat pocket a small notebook, his record book. In it he notes the time, the temperature, the weather, the current rate of the clock as measured against his reference timepiece, a pocket watch of Swiss manufacture given to him on his first day in this position by his predecessor, who had worn it for 30 years before him. He writes, rain, steady, clock keeping well, all gears oiled, weights in order. And then he puts the notebook away and sits quietly in the chair, in the brass and iron room, in the clock tower, with the rain outside and the gears turning and the pendulum marking its patient, eternal count. This is what it is to keep time. Not to own it, not to control it, simply to keep it, to tend it the way one tends a fire or a garden, to ensure that it continues running smoothly, that its measurement remains accurate, that the great machine of it is oiled and wound and neither hurried nor allowed to slow, and then to sit back and let it run. The clockmaker understands, in the way that only people who spend their nights in clock towers can understand, that time is not a human invention. It existed before the first gear was cast, before the first pendulum swung, before the first sundial threw its shadow across the first stone. The mechanism only points to it, the way a finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. But there is comfort in the pointing. There is comfort in the precision, in knowing that when the great bells of this tower strike midnight for heavy, resonant notes that roll out over the rain-wet rooftops of London, absorbed by the fog, softened by the distance, they strike within 2 seconds of the true time. 2 seconds in 24 hours. A margin so small it is almost spiritual in its exactness. You may hear the midnight bell from where you lie. Not loudly. It will come to you muffled, pass through stone and iron and the warm air of your little room, reduced to something felt as much as heard, a deep vibration in the walls, a pulse in the floor beneath the bench. 1, 2, 3, 4. Midnight. The precise middle of the night, the hinge on which the darkness swings. After midnight, you are no longer in the evening, you are in the early hours, the small hours, the hours that belong to the clockmakers and the bakers and the night nurses and the few quiet souls who find themselves most themselves when the rest of the world is sleeping. In the clock tower, the clockmaker hears the bells without moving. He has heard them from this chair perhaps 7,000 times. He will hear them perhaps 7,000 times more, if his health holds and his eyes stay good and his hands remain steady enough for the fine work of oiling. He does not find them remarkable. He finds them simply correct. The world is as it should be. The clock is keeping time. The rain is falling. The station is at rest below. His eyes close for a moment. Not sleep, he does not sleep on duty, never has, never will, but rest. The particular rest of a man whose work is done for the hour, who sits in the company of things that are functioning exactly as they should, who has no decision to make and no problem to solve and nothing required of him but to be present, to listen, to be available should something need his attention. The gears turn. The pendulum swings. The rain falls. Let his rest become your rest. Let the sound of the pendulum, that patient, unvarying tick and tock, become the sound beneath the rain, beneath the soft creak of the building, beneath your own slow breathing. Tick and tock and tick and tock, each swing equal to the last. Each swing returning to where it began and departing again and returning in an oscillation so regular, so reliable, so utterly without surprise, that the mind can rest against it the way the body rests against a firm pillow. You do not need to count the swings. You do not need to count anything. The clockmaker is counting for you. He has always been counting. High up in his brass and iron room, in the rain, at the top of the building that shelters you. He tends the mechanism that marks the passage of this night second by second, minute by minute, each one identical, each one sufficient, each one carrying you gently forward through the dark toward morning. Safe inside. The clock ticks on. The rain continues to fall, finding the stone of the tower, finding the iron of the roof, finding the glass of the platform dome and running down it in long bright lines, running off the edges of the iron awnings in a soft, continuous drip that has been the station's lullaby since the building first stood here, decades ago, and will be its lullaby long after all of us. The clockmaker, the engineers, the navvies, you resting on your leather bench, have become part of the past that old buildings quietly absorb. You are warm. You are held. In the clock tower, the clockmaker's eyes remain closed. In the room below, you are very nearly asleep. And the clock keeps time, and the rain keeps falling, and the night moves forward on its slow and patient gears. Come back to the room. Come back to the warmth and the wool and the amber glow of the stove in the corner. You have been traveling through the great iron nave of the station, through the history of the men who built it, up through the brass and shadow of the clock tower, and now you are back, right here, in this small lamplit room, on this wide leather bench, under this heavy heather gray blanket. You have not moved. You were here all along. It is past midnight now. You heard the bell, perhaps, a little while ago, that deep, resonant pulse moving through the walls of the building, through the floor beneath you, arriving in your body more than your ears. For slow strokes, patient and certain as everything else in this old station. And now the midnight hour has passed, and the night has crossed its own threshold, and what lies ahead is only the slow, deep drift of the small hours. The hours that ask nothing of you. The station has grown quieter still. You would not have thought it possible. It seemed already so quiet, so settled into itself, so completely at rest. But there is a quality of silence that only arrives after midnight, a quality that is different in kind from the mere absence of sound. It is a presence, almost, a texture, the particular stillness of a large building in the deep of night, when even the pipes have stopped their murmuring, when even the iron has finished its cooling, when the last traces of the day's warmth and motion and human presence have finally, fully dissolved. What remains is the rain. Only the rain. Listen to it now. Let everything else, every thought, every image, every remnant of the stories you have been traveling through, let it all recede, the way the sound of a train recedes when the train has gone, growing smaller and smaller until it is indistinguishable from silence. Let the history recede. Let the clock tower recede. Let even the room recede, slightly, the walls softening, the lamp dimming at the edges of your awareness, the stove becoming simply a warmth rather than a thing you can see. And let the rain come forward. It is falling on the glass dome above the platform. That high, arching glass 60 feet above the iron tracks is receiving the rain with the same patient generosity it has shown on every rainy night since it was first raised into position. The rain finds every pane. It runs across the iron struts in thin, bright rivers. It drips from the lowest point of each arch in a slow, hypnotic sequence, drip and drip and drip down to the platform far below, where it lands in small spreading circles on the stone, each circle widening and fading and being replaced by the next. It has been doing this all evening. It will do this all night. Your blanket is very heavy. Not heavy in a way that troubles you. Heavy in the way of things that have absorbed warmth over time, the accumulated heat of the stove, the warmth of your own body rising through the wool and being held there, returned to you layered. It is the weight of being thoroughly, completely covered, of there being no gap, no draft, no coolness reaching you from any direction. You are sealed inside your warmth. Your hands have gone still. They are resting now with the particular stillness of hands that have finished their work for the day. Hands that have held things and carried things through the long hours of ordinary life, and are now simply resting, their fingers slightly curled, their palms soft, their knuckles warm. Let them rest. They have done enough. Your shoulders are down. not consciously lowered, simply down, the way they go when the body finally believes, truly believes, that there is nothing more to brace against. The muscle memory of a long day's tension has released. Shoulders down, jaw soft, the small muscles around your eyes unclenched, your face smooth and still as the surface of still water. You look, if anyone could see you, like someone already sleeping. The oil lamp on the table beside you is burning very low. The flame has diminished to a thread, a single, thin filament of amber light, barely enough to cast a shadow. The lamp will burn out before morning. When it does, the room will not be dark. The gas lamps on the platform beyond the window will continue their patient vigil, sending their soft gold light through the glass in long, diffuse ribbons that will lie across the floor and the blanket and your sleeping form like something between moonlight and memory. But the lamp is not out yet. For now it burns, just. The stove has settled. The coals that were glowing orange and amber when you first lay down have burned lower now, their fierce heat gentled into something more sustained and quiet. The iron belly of the stove is still warm, very warm, but the crackle has given way to a soft, continuous radiation, a slow breathing out of heat, steady as the rain, steady as the pendulum in the clock tower above. The room holds this warmth like a cupped hand holds water. Carefully, without spillage, with the ease of something that has been holding warmth for a very long time and has learned exactly how. Outside the window, the platform lanterns burn. The small, constant flutter of their flames inside the glass, responding to drafts so slight they are imperceptible to any human sense but seem, somehow, to be felt by the flames, who lean and straighten and lean again in a slow, continuous dance. The tracks below them are still and gleaming. The platform is empty. Everything that needs to be inside is inside, including you. Let your breathing slow now. Not deliberately, not as an exercise. Simply allow it. Allow the rhythm of the rain to suggest a rhythm to your breath. The rain does not rush. The rain does not hold itself. It arrives and releases and arrives again in a cycle so natural and so old that the body knows it before the mind does. Breathe in, slowly, and out, and in. The clock above is ticking. You cannot hear it from here. The stone and iron between you and the clock room absorb the sound entirely. But you know it is ticking. You know the pendulum is swinging in its slow, faithful arc. You know the gears are turning, each one moving the next, in a chain of motion so precise and so quiet that the whole mechanism could sit in a room with a sleeping child and not disturb them. The night is being measured above you. You do not need to measure it yourself. Let us be very quiet now. The stories have been told. The history has been honored. The clockmaker sits in his chair with his eyes resting and his hands still in his lap, and the clock turns above him, and the rain falls outside, and London sleeps beneath its gray and silver sky. And here, in this small room that smells of cedar and old leather and the faintest trace of coal smoke, you are resting. You are resting so deeply now. The blanket, the warmth, the amber light growing dimmer as the lamp burns low. The rain against the window, that soft, familiar percussion, neither urgent nor fading, simply present, simply itself. The sound that has accompanied 10,000 sleeping travelers in 100 rainy stations across this old, rain-blessed country. You are one of them now. One of the long, quiet procession of souls who found shelter here, in the arms of iron and glass, when the night was wet and the world was too large, and all that was needed was a warm room and a blanket and the sound of rain on a roof. They rested here, and you are resting here. And the station holds you all, holds every one of you. Every sleeping traveler who ever drew a blanket up and heard this rain and felt this particular, irreplaceable warmth, holds you in its iron memory, which is longer and quieter than any human memory, and does not distinguish between past and present, but simply keeps. Simply holds. The lamp flickers once. A small thing, a last gesture. The flame leans sideways in some imperceptible current of air, recovers for a moment, then settles lower still. The room grows softer. Not dark, never quite dark, with the platform lanterns pressing their gold through the window, but softer. The edges of things lose their definition. The walnut paneling becomes a warm darkness. The ceiling becomes the sky. The blanket becomes the earth. And you are between them, warm and held and going. The rain. Only the rain now. Finding the glass above the platform. Finding the iron awnings at the station's edge, where it falls in a soft, continuous fringe, a curtain of water between the shelter and the night, between inside and outside, between the warm and the cold, between the sleeping and the world. You are on the right side of that curtain. You have always been on the right side. In a few hours, the first light will begin at the edges of the sky. Not yet. Not for a long time yet. The night has hours still ahead of it. Quiet hours, deep hours. The hours in which the body does its best and most ancient work. The mending, the sorting, the slow and wordless processing of everything the day brought. Let it do that work. You do not need to be present for it. You only need to be still. The clockmaker sleeps in his chair. Just for a little while. He will wake, he always wakes in time for his next round. But for now, he sleeps, and his notebook is open in his lap, and his pencil has fallen to the floor without a sound, and the clock above him turns and turns in the brass-smelling dark. And the rain falls on the tower. And the rain falls on the glass. And the rain falls on the tracks and the lanterns and the cobblestones and the river and all the sleeping rooftops of this old, rain-held city. Safe inside. The rain continues to fall. With every drop, you go deeper. With every breath, the night holds you closer. The warmth, the wool, the amber dark, and the rain. You are here. You are warm. The station is resting around you, as it has rested around 10,000 souls before you, as it will rest around 10,000 more when you and I are both only echoes in old iron walls. It does not mind the hours. It does not mind the rain. Simply stands and holds and keeps. The clock is ticking somewhere above you. Tick. Tock. Tick. The rain is falling on the glass. It has been falling since before you arrived. It will be falling when the morning comes. But morning is far away and soft, and no concern of yours tonight. Let everything go now. The names of things, the shapes of things, the sense of where your body ends and the warmth begins. There is only the rain and the warmth, and you going gently down into sleep the way a lamp flame goes not out but in, folding inward, growing smaller and warmer and more itself, until it is only a point of light, barely a light at all, a warmth without a source, a presence without edges. Good night. Sleep well inside these iron walls, under this rain-drummed glass, in the amber dark of this old and sheltering station. The rain is all there is now. Let it take you.